previous instalment, I saved a baby from a tunnel because hashtag save the children or something. Now I guess there's a deep state Satanist chasing me, which, you know, fucking sucks, man. Check out part 1 for a detailed rundown on what Q is, what Q Australia edition is, and what some of the current talking points are. Anyway, missions forward, patriots. Here's part 2 of Aussie Q.
Just so you know, what is this?
You're never gonna make us wear a mask. No, you're never gonna make us wear a mask. Never gonna make us, never gonna make us, never gonna make us wear a mask. You can stick your coronavirus up your ass. You can stick your coronavirus up your ass. You can stick your coronavirus, stick your coronavirus. You can stick your coronavirus up your ass. We are the 99%. Singing we are the 99%. Singing we are the 99. We are the 90. We are the 99%.
Now listen, we are the 99% is a slogan coined by legendary anti-capitalist anthropologist Dave Graeber, who passed away just last week. He coined that term for the Occupy Wall Street movement. He did so because he wanted the Occupy movement to spearhead the many, the 99%, to save themselves from the financial elite and a broken capitalist system, rather than waiting for that system to do that which it is precisely designed to never do. He'd just written an important book called Debt, The First 5,000 Years, which reframes a popular conception of what exactly the hell debt is and ultimately calls for broad debt cancellation. Now I'm stuck at home watching pseudo-political role plays like the anti-lockdown movement in Australia pilfering that legend's slogan as protest chic to call for absolutely fucking nothing. What? A trip to Bunnings to let their snot flop about in the aisle. And then there's a QAnon lot who've not only reinvented the idea of elites to become a pack of pedophile Satanists instead of the actual financial elite, but who also cling desperately to this idea that there's something called NESARA, a fake legislative act made up by a conspiracy theorist who reckons big government is somehow going to cancel all of America's debt because Trump loves you. And worse, GESARA, the global edition, an even stupider idea that the secret loving MAGA elite are somehow going to do it for the whole fucking world. No, champ, they're not. That's not how it works. You'd have to fight for it, but oh no, you're fighting for no masks in a pandemic. What fucking heroes you are. Thank you for your service. I just want them to know that they're borrowing wholesale from anarchist and anti-capitalist theory, and I want the rest of you to know where it all comes from, because no, we are the 99% is not a corny, meaningless Darrow Facebook Sparta low-res meme by fucking sad cases.
You can stick your poison vaccine up your
Anyway, let me unbunch my knickers. We had a big Freedom Day last week in Australia. That's the latest round of anti-lockdown rallies. People screamed stuff about freedom and the Constitution at the cops. It was basically a big melting pot of competing conspiracy theories, which sometimes align, sometimes don't. And yes, they had some QAnons there, and also some hashtag save the children types. So that stoked some interest in Q's relationship to the anti-lockdown movement. What is it? How does it fit in? It's worth considering. How does Q relate to the lockdown? So I've heard some people saying that the anti-lockdown movement is fundamentally a QAnon thing. That's rubbish. No, it's not. The anti-lockdown movement in Australia is a melting pot of adjacent conspiracy theory movements, and they're all cross-pollinating in Facebook spaces, occasionally organising rallies and, increasingly posting obnoxious videos annoying coppers or staff in Bunnings, harassing people. And that's all worth looking at, but it's not all QAnon. Briefly, the contingents that make up the anti-lockdown movement in Australia are: 1, the anti-vax movement. This movement was already huge. It's been going for decades, well-funded, well-established. This is where the Bill Gates shit comes from. They're the ones who've always been obsessed with him due to his work in vaccines. They're the ones who contributed the Bill Gates pandemic aspect.
And if you're keen on reading more from a really measured perspective about the history of anti-vaccine trends and the important function and role of rumour in society, then I really can't recommend this book highly enough. Stuck by Heidi J. Larson. It just came out. I'm loving it. I'm reading it at the moment. Get into it. 2, the anti-5G movement. This movement is lifted from the UK and from the US, and it's just the latest manifestation of the anti-tech hysteria stuff that springs up whenever we get a new generation of wireless tech. Only now it's been supercharged by the pandemic, of course. Some of them think that 5G causes corona, but many of them, to be fair, simply want more testing on 5G technology, which arguably the telco companies could have done. And if you'd like to hear a really interesting discussion about the use of 5G surveillance tech in China, then please listen to episode 11 of my podcast, The Pork and Feed the Birds, where I speak to Dr. Kaz, an academic. Some of the uses and the ways of advertising 5G tech in China are pretty astounding. Anyway, there's me arrogantly recommending myself.
Actually, some QAnons are now making shit up about 5G healing tech, would you believe? Because they've realised that they've been unintentionally hurting Trump due to his 5G infrastructure push, and that's pretty funny.
5G can also be used for healing purposes. The frequency that it's at can also be used for healing. So whatever can be used for bad can be used for good. So if you hear 5G coming in the future, it's all good.
3, the sovereign citizen movement. If you've watched many of these videos, you've seen some people raging at public officials or Bunnings cashiers that Australia is a corporation and yelling, "Am I a living human?" And, I do not understand, but I comprehend.
The best way of understanding the Australian sovereign citizen movement, if you have the time, it's very lengthy, is by going onto the Free Man Delusion blog. This person is an ex-Sov-Cit who eventually learned better, very much the hard way. He has crafted what is no less than a full encyclopedia of the strange, kooky, sovereign citizen worldview.
Finally, 4, big tent conspiracy movements, such as QAnon. Now, while these movements are cross-pollinating through the anti-lockdown movement, they're actually all in a bit of a competition to nab the chooks and to take them into their wing after the lockdown is done. Because after all, coronavirus lockdown circumstances are very fluid, they're shifting, they're not permanent. So these circumstances under which they all get together are not intended to last forever. And they know that. So at this stage, I have to say, in that competition to nab as many chooks into your particular farm as possible, I think the anti-vax and the QAnon factions have been the most successful at rustling up chooks. We know we're in a pandemic. We know conspiracy movements, such as the ones we've just described, have all had a huge shot in the arm. What's happening here? If we step back a little bit, why are people so inclined to fall for conspiracist thinking, regardless of which of these contingents that they fall into? And why more so during a pandemic? Let's zoom out a little. What motivates people to become conspiracy-minded? As it turns out, our brains are uniquely wired to make us partial to conspiracy theories in the right sets of circumstances in particular. More often than not, we're completely at the mercy of the wiring in our heads in this regard. I hit up a book called Suspicious Minds by Rob Brotherton for the psychology behind this, and I really do recommend it. It's a great book. Well, let's go through some of the things that I think relate to the situation we're in right now. There's a thing that psychologists call compensatory control. Chaotic circumstances and a loss of our personal sense of control are enough to make us compensate for the unsettling feeling by imagining that something or someone is in control. We mentally appoint like a driving agent when we aren't capable of doing the driving ourselves, particularly when we're anxious. There's two ways that our brain does this. One is by appointing a powerful ally. We assume that someone is guiding things, with our best interests at heart, no matter how bad the circumstances are. And that makes us trust the plan a little bit more. Breathe a little easier. For many people, this agent could be a benevolent god. For others, a super spy. The other thing that our brains might do is appoint a powerful enemy. And that might not sound like a relief to sort of instate someone who's like an evil guiding hand who's ruining everything for us. But in fact, for this same reason, it does help us to make sense psychologically of drastic or chaotic circumstances. We can understand something better if we believe that someone is behind it. We all have inbuilt intention detectors, something we develop apparently in the first few months of our life. It lets us interpret faces and stories and threats before they appear in front of us. But we're not mind readers, so we just kind of assume and we put pieces together in patterns. Now, this reaction never goes away. We don't outgrow it. You would like to think that as an adult, you'd become so good at mediating your brain's instinctive reaction with your knowledge and your experience, but all your mediating only happens after your very first instinct, which is to assign intention to something, to everything. So in times of stress, we actually lose our ability to do that mediating afterwards, and we go straight to this intention detector thing that our brains do for us. What I mean is that we're psychologically inclined to believe that stressy circumstances are the subject of someone's intention. We're master pattern detectors, but sometimes we actually do this a little too hyperactively, a little too well. We connect disparate dots. We see patterns that aren't really there. Note that conspiracy theorists always talk about connecting the dots. Always. It's genuinely one of their favourite ways to visualise the process of digesting their conspiracies. And that is precisely because it is what the mental process is that's happening. We're doing that upstairs. We are connecting dots. Our brains do this other neat little trick called proportionality bias, a particular cognitive bias wherein we are psychologically encouraged to believe that big events must have had big causes. When the event impacts upon us directly, we're more likely to be convinced that random chance couldn't possibly have been a big factor. For example, a pandemic couldn't have come about from bat juice getting in a pangolin's eyes. No, it's too impactful. Look at how it's changed everyone's lives. Look how many people died, It's got to be a bioweapon. It's got to be the NWO. It has to be. It's too bad to just be random, right? Psych scholars have done tests on how much being reminded of existential threats leads us immediately after to be sympathetic to conspiracy theories. If you are reminded of shit that you can't control, death or disease or something like that, you will immediately afterwards be more predisposed to believe in any conspiracy about anything. And let's be clear about this. We can't control this stuff. We can't do a thing about it. We can reason our way out of things. We can learn, we can study and what have you, but we can't change what our brain does to let us interpret situations. We don't know what we don't know, and we're in fact at the mercy of our own pink blobs in this respect. Consider the tidy desk experiment, in which people were invited to interpret patterns in a series of chaotic blobby images in either tidy desks or messy ones. Those at the messy desks saw more patterns in the images than people sitting at tidy desks because their brain was trying to organise and establish patterns harder. Now, We are in a pandemic. I'm not sure if you noticed. We're stressed and our lives suck. Our brains are screaming at us to make order out of all this bullshit. They want us to establish intention. They want us to put in place an agent or a guiding hand. They want us to connect the dots. This all finds a welcome home in conspiracy. Any conspiracy. Well, there were some psychs who did a test on people's partiality to believing conspiracy theories about Osama bin Laden's fate. People who were more likely to believe that Osama had in fact died not during a raid by soldiers under the order of the Obama administration, but way back in 2001, were also more likely to believe that he's still alive. The journey, the truth-seeking and the establishment of alternative ideas is, for many conspiracy theorists, more important than the destination. Now, I will say this, the path these people take, it's not easy. And it's also not uninformed. It's ill-informed, but it's not uninformed. You can admit that this is true if you've ever had a yarn with your QAnon aunty or anyone falling down the rabbit hole. You might go in there all cocky and confident, oh God, this person's deluded. They just need some facts and reason. And you come in there unarmed, and it is in fact them who spams you with 7 million links. And it's a little bit hard to keep up with all their information. And hey, I can't lie, I'm susceptible myself. I've said, I think more than once in this video so far, that I think QAnon is a psyop to generate radical fringe support from anxious Republicans in the US, using the highly emotive subject of pedophilia to reconcile their tensions about the chaos that's come up during the Trump administration, and more importantly, to keep these highly enthused radical online armies doing free online marketing for Trump, thereby generating further electoral support for him. I firmly believe that, but I don't have the evidence for it. It just seems true to me. But I don't want to tell you that I think it's okay to leave your kook QAnon auntie as is. See, I don't mind conspiracy theories in and of themselves. I really don't. My issue with QAnon is not that it's a conspiracy theory. My issue with it is that it's a weaponized conspiracy theory that specifically aims to drag people hard right. Now, whether that's completely by design, as per my conspiracy from earlier, or whether it's merely because a ragtag assembly of right-wing manipulators have found the exact right time in which to capitalise on everyone's anxieties, it's happening. And that is why QAnon is worth discussing for me. Here is my main focus. There are two tiers of people in the QAnon world. Firstly, there's the chooks. These are the dupes. The people who become indoctrinated, whose job it is to dutifully spend all fucking day constantly retweeting everyone who hashtags where we go one, we go all, and save the children. 2020 sucks, and hopefully I've made it clear that I have a lot of pity for many of these people. People are scared and broke and confused, and they lost their businesses and they lost their jobs. It's a lot more empowering to feel like a rebellious info warrior than it is to feel, terrified, scared, anxious, confused and trapped at home. I understand that gives these people more agency. But then there's the other tier, and they're the chook feeders. They're people like the Ricardo Bosis, the Pete Evanses in Australia, the many conspiracy accounts that stand to benefit from propagating these theories because it's a lucrative career for them. Donald Trump is the God King chook feeder in the QAnon world because he's signalled QAnon and retweeted QAnon accounts many, many times since 2018 because it's been politically expeditious for him to energise his own fringe support online base and to never denounce it, even though it's pretty dangerous. These are people who have commercial or political motivations for propagating this conspiracy worldview that capitalises on, fear, anxiety, very understandable trauma related to childhood sexual abuse, and a range of other mental health issues. And I do not take pity on the chook feeders. I hold them personally responsible for it. I blame them, and I fucking despise them.
Now, when I covered some psychology relevant to conspiracy earlier, I just wanted to have you all see that all of our thinking
is a little closer to conspiracist thought than we might initially admit. What I did not want to do was to dismiss the advent of conspiracy as merely a pack of quirks of the brain. Rumour has an important function in society. It helps us express anxieties on a collective level. Those anxieties can stem from real-life quandaries society finds itself in, and those quandaries are exacerbated by shitty situations. The material conditions that people find themselves in can supercharge a conspiracy network. And I believe that QAnon is an expression of anxiety about irresponsible and dishonest government. The sunk cost fallacy of believing in the Trump campaign became so exhausting so quickly into his presidency that the appeal of a shadow narrative in which he's secretly an anti-pedo liberator became irresistible. Better that than the chaotic realities of the US right now. Now that we've got coronavirus, a hope for a secret utopian liberator narrative is really fucking appealing to everyone. What causes people to enter the anti-lockdown movement? Usually the first thing you hear from your friends dipping into it is their frustrations about the discrepancies between the government's approach to you and, say, Coles and Bunnings and shopping centres, where you can wander about at will and buy things. People see those discrepancies and they call them evidence of governments lying. And I get it. From there, it's only a short leap of faith into the utopian fantasy land of Aussie Q, where you get to believe that, hey, it's okay because after all, there's a big secret plan rather than the shitty chaos we actually live in. The sad truth, of course, is that people know we're participating in a late capitalist death cult. Many of them just don't have the words for it. We've elected tyrants and morons because we liked their viral social media campaigns. Everyone knows we're headed down a path with global warming that we can't walk back. These are people's anxieties, and the fantasy land sounds pretty good. So that's the other part of weaponized conspiracist thinking. It's better than the hell we know we probably can't get out of. Bit of light entertainment for you there. So if we agree that conspiracies flourish due to a combination of the stuff our brains naturally do, grifters grifting, and real life and political circumstance, then why should we care about this particular conspiracy, QAnon, so much? What's so bad about Q? The really worrying thing about QAnon for me is that it dilutes and obfuscates the trauma and the reality of the real victims of child abuse because it's obsessed with making up pedophiles and calling non-pedophiles pedophiles to settle political scores. You know what? No, thank you. We already have enough pedos. I'm not really in the market for making more. And for QAnons, everybody they don't like is a pedophile. And invariably that's left-wing people, which, as I said before, is completely by design. It is their favourite, tool in the toolbox. And how fucking offensive to the real victims of pedophilia, Everyone they don't like is going to be arrested and executed for pedophilia because QAnon started out as a fascist power fantasy where everyone you don't like gets murdered. Now, not all conspiracy theories materialise as genuine threats to people, and in fact, most of them don't. But, as I said, Q is a fascist power fantasy at its core, and that is conducive to eventually leading people to give up on trusting the plan, as Q says in the drops, and taking power back into their own hands. And some conspiracies can kill in spades. So you may have heard of a document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's made up. It was copied from a story, but it's meant to be a secret missive from some elite Jews to the rest of the elite Jews, telling them how they're going to take over the world. It's absolute garbage. But during the 20th century, it influenced violence against Jewish people. And then that helped influence that one particular regime. I don't know if you can remember them? Remember the guys in the snappy suits?
Pretty cool then to see Aussie QAnons repackaging it as though it's some FBI super secret spy drop, eh? Love it.
So don't discount that some conspiracy theories can turn bloody. And Q does have the capacity to radicalise people at shocking rates.
Lawyers for the man accused of killing a reputed mobster on Staten Island say he was trying to make a citizen's arrest. Anthony Camello's legal team says the 24-year-old was obsessed with the QAnon conspiracy theory. He also believed that Francisco Frankie Boy Cali was a figure in the, quote, deep state. Camello's attorneys say that he thought he was under President Trump's protection.
According to an arrest affidavit, Parker police spoke with Absuck's teenage daughter, who told them there were lots of weapons in their home and that her mom was planning a, quote, raid to, quote, kidnap her own son. The girl also told police that a member of QAnon, only described as Ryan, had recently moved into the home to provide protection and that he was a sniper.
30-year-old Matthew Wright is in Mojave County Jail on charges that include terrorist acts. Yesterday, authorities say he parked his armored truck on the U.S. Highway 93 bridge, blocking traffic, and he held a sign that said, "Release the OIG report."
37-year-old Jessica Prim Facebook Live the entire scene, telling officers she thought President Donald Trump was speaking directly to her. She had a box filled with knives in the back of her car.
This morning, a man is facing charges in Northampton after police say he led them on a chase along Route 101 while driving a car full of children.
Donald Trump, I need a miracle or something. Somebody, QAnon, help me.
Gonna help you.
QAnon, help me.
I bet Hillary's gonna help.
Hillary's not gonna help me. Yeah, right. Hillary's demonic.
You know I tried to cost on you.
I know about Hillary cutting open the 10-year-old.
Local man accused of deliberately running a train off the tracks, trying to slam into the hospital ship Mercy.
He did it out of the desire to wake people up. Moreno stated that he thought that the USNS Mercy was suspicious, and he did not believe that the ship is what they say it's for.
This is the potential of QAnon to mobilise the mentally unwell and the anxious people, and we've got lots of them during the pandemic, to radical and unhinged acts of violence. And there are experts in online radicalisation who've said that the rate at which QAnon can convert and mobilise people currently rivals that of ISIS.
We all know that you're full of it, Daniel Andrews, and your time has now come. It is time for you to shave and prepare your neck to be hung. You will be going to Gitmo. You will be hung on live television, and it will be broadcasted across this planet.
So it would be best if you could get your auntie out of this shit sooner rather than later. How do I get back my QAnon auntie? Okay, so I believe that you are the best person to engage with her. Not me, not randoms, you. Because you're her loved one. And QAnon people don't make their loved ones feel like loved ones once they go too hard down the rabbit hole. There's a whole Reddit devoted to this. If you go onto the Reddit QAnon casualties, you just see the most heartbreaking stories. I mean, there's one fucking guy who, you know, and I don't blame him. He feels like he has to pretend to be a QAnon just to keep his mum in his life. I'm kind of laughing because it's funny imagining the conversations, but how depressing, hey?
Oh, hello, Mum. Yeah, happy Mother's Day, Mum. Yeah, where we go when we go all, Mum. Yeah. How are you? How's your Mother's Day going? I didn't ask about Donald Trump. I was saying, how are you? Yeah, hashtag God wins, Mum. What did Dad get you anything for Mother's Day? A Trump 2020 flag. That's... No, I'm not a pedophile. I think you need to be frank with your loved one that you don't agree, and tell them in non-emotive and non-argumentative terms, because this is not the argument you're having. You're just having a brief chat with them. Be frank with them that you don't agree and that you'd be happy to talk about it. But crucially, don't foist that conversation on them right there and then. In fact, you're committing to not having the conversation there and then. Please remember that QAnons are being indoctrinated to the idea that everyone who disagrees with them is either a shill to or a member of the deep state or the cabal or a radical far leftist. So what I'm saying is that you have a starring role in their new worldview. And you didn't ask for it, but you have been cast as a character. And so you do have to tread very carefully, because suddenly your opinion, so they're being told, does not count and should not be listened to. So if you question their new ideas in the wrong way, you'll simply fulfill your role and they'll push you aside. Therefore, and I want to thank Vosh for this, another YouTuber, he was talking actually about talking to people, who've going down the more traditional red pill, white nationalist pipeline, but it really does apply. It's a good idea. I think that you should experiment with telling them that you frankly disagree with them and that you're worried about them and that you want to talk to them about this and, have a civil conversation about your differences in ideas, but that you will not open that conversation up with them up until and unless they would like to have it at another time of their choosing. And once you've said that, close the book. I don't care if they then spam you with 20 links to various cooked ideas related to the deep state and the cabal and Melbourne's underground tunnels and Panda Eyes and Lady Gaga and Chrissy Teigen. I'm not interested, and neither should you be. No, say to them, we're not going to have the conversation now, but if you'd like to talk to me at another point, let's do it. And let's just be civil and just talk about our ideas. And the reason I say this, and here's the idea behind this, is because if they choose to come back to you at another time, if they do that, they're already making a tacit admission that your opinion matters to them. And that helps in any respectful conversation. Particularly important here because it reduces the likelihood that they'll dismiss you, as they're being told by the new worldview to do, dismiss you as the enemy. If they come to you, as per your civil offer previously, they're already going, I listened to you. I'm happy to talk to you about this. And that's already a huge win in any productive conversation. Meanwhile, as you're waiting for that chat, and remember, it may not happen at all, you can't force it, you can only offer, start educating yourself. I want you to get used to QAnon ideas. Unfortunately, you are useless to them and to yourself if you get triggered by the offensive shit that some of these people come out with. And I understand, but I'm just saying, you are not useful in a productive conversation if you are getting emotional about their ideas, particularly if your aim is to have a productive conversation with them. You are right, and boy do I empathise with you, but you're not going to be effective at engaging with them. You need to get educated about QAnon to talk to them about it, but you also do need to do it because you need the bite taken out of these ideas for you to be useful in this chat. That doesn't mean that you're going to start enjoying this grotesque shit about George Soros funding BLM and George Floyd isn't really dead and Lady Gaga's signalling to pedos and Hillary Clinton terrifies kids and kills them and rapes them and sucks the adrenochrome. This is horrible crap, horrible delusional crap. And I have been looking at it for months and I hate it more than you, I would hazard a guess. So I'm not saying, I don't actually like this stuff, but I'm used to it. And so that means that when my QAnon or my Q-pilled friend repeats this stuff to me, I don't immediately fly into a fit of rage at the offensiveness of this garbage. And that's helpful for me, because if my aim is to have a productive conversation with them and offer them some alternatives, I am then better placed to do it. Also, hey, your research on QAnon lets you compile the best debunking resources on. You can compile that stuff. And I suggest to do that, like get a document, put all the stuff in the document, get ready, We already covered this before. You'll do yourself no good assuming that they're uninformed. They're highly informed. It's just that they're ill-informed. You need to be informed as well. Now, remember, what I hopefully established earlier is that conspiratorial or conspiracist thinking is a mode of thinking, and there's very good reasons for it to occur. So I don't think you get anywhere by simply going, oh, that's not true. It's not enough. You might experience some joy in getting people to worry about or look into more tangible conspiracies. So, for example, do you really want to go down the Epstein rabbit hole? You can offer to people the fun pedo hunting QAnon podcast. They're highly conspiracist-minded people, whilst also, for my money, being pretty funny and having decent politics. So they sort of look at the Epstein stuff as a nexus for a whole world of conspiracies. And hell yeah, there's a whole world of conspiracies out there which really did come true that are worth looking into. Do you want to explore QAnon with like an insulating layer of non-bullshit and like intelligence added in for your protection? Good. Get your auntie to start listening to the fucking fantastic QAnon Anonymous podcast, which I just love. It's one of my favourite podcasts, and without which I would know comparatively absolutely fuck all about QAnon. They're brilliant, they're talented, they're hilarious, because I'm not doubting that conspiracies are fun. I really do think that they are, and I think we'd be silly to simply go, that's not true, and to deny their appeal for people who are kind of like at home and looking for something larger than themselves in the pandemic. I'm down the rabbit hole all the time, mate. I'm just saying, try to get your auntie back out, and then she can go back down the rabbit hole with an added layer of protection. You see? It's like wearing a mental or an emotional condom when you go down the rabbit hole. And setting aside indulging the fun of conspiracy, what I reckon so many frustrated people need right now, and that includes your Q-pilled auntie, is the vocabulary and knowledge to understand who's really oppressing them at the moment. Spoiler alert, it's not a cabal. A lot of politics is inaccessible wank. So I start and end with the people who talk accessibly, not just as an onboarding so I can become smart enough to digest the inaccessible wank. No, if they're not accessible, I don't want to fucking know. And your auntie won't either. Here's what I think. Your auntie can't handle hearing about surpluses while the world is on fire. She just doesn't know that that's the problem yet. I can't fucking handle it either. If we're trapped bodily in the spasms of a dying capitalist death cult over here, it seems sorta important that we find people able to communicate that pretty urgent fact. I mentioned anti-capitalist thinker David Graeber at the start of this video. He is a legend. May he rest in peace. Start by looking at him and his work.
All that's really happening when it runs a surplus is that same government takes that same debt and effectively transfers it directly to you as higher mortgage debt, payday loans, and so on, at much higher rates of interest. Yet somehow taxes never seem to go down. Everyone really knows this. It's just a taboo to say it. Because what it really means is, if the government balances its books, it makes it almost impossible for you to balance yours.
Finally, maybe you want to tell her about who it is that's actually running Q, because if they're so obsessed with the idea that that events are being guided by a mysterious, evil, invisible hand, then perhaps they'd like to know who that invisible hand actually is. Frederick Brennan, who's a criminally undersourced person, and is the guy who actually started 8chan, has said more than once that he strongly believes that Jim Watkins, who's the guy who owns the current iteration of those image boards, 8kun, he is the person that does the the QAnon account, who is Q, and that's most likely the case. That's who Q is. He's a guy called Jim Watkins, who hosted 8chan previously and now 8could, and 8chan was a great hive of pedophiles. Good place to go if you wanted to get pedophile content. So Q is a guy called Jim Watkins since at least November 2019. There you go. You want to know who Q is? He's not a super spy. He's a pig farmer.
Here's Q, aka Jim Watkins, owner of 8could. Keeps Q going because it's the only thing still bringing traffic to his shitty scumbag image board on his old Philippines pig farm, shoveling shit. Jim Watkins, pig farmer. Actually, top officials in the CIA secretly told me that he actually fucks the pigs. Yeah, that's right, he fucks the pigs. They told me he fucks the pigs and then he murders them. Drinks the adrenaline in their pig glands to stay young and hot. That's right, hot pig rootin' Jim Watkins. Always fucking actual pigs. Donald Trump's gonna stop him, I heard. Sorry if it's a bit unethical to spread made-up rumours about someone's deviant sexual behaviour just because I don't like them. I'd hate to do that to the guy who single-handedly keeps Q going. That would be really nasty, wouldn't it?
And hey, all of this, and it might get you nowhere. Alright? I know, I want to acknowledge that. I really do. But if you do all this, you'll be skilling yourself up so that if anybody can reach a QAnon aunty, if anyone has that power in their life, if anyone understands what aunty is deep diving into, it's you. And so if undertaking that effort with your loved one is something you have the spoons for, and it's really important to you, and if it's something you think you might be able to do, then these are just some ideas as to how you can be best placed to give it a shot. So I would say good luck, because I don't fucking envy you.
Well, I'm glad I saved that real baby from that real tunnel Satanist. Guess going down the rabbit hole was worth it after all. Hopefully you can save your auntie in the same way. Check out the links in the description if you need to know more about QAnon. If you enjoy or benefit from the work I do, please chuck a clam or two my way on Patreon. Thanks for your support. Where we go one, we go all. Just thought I'd add that in there for the follower count.